In today's episode, we're exploring a game-changing topic, artificial intelligence. Could AI be the next big breakthrough for the autism community, or does it come with hidden risks? We're diving into how AI could revolutionize communication, learning, and daily living, while also uncovering potential concerns about privacy, bias, and dependency. You won't want to miss this balanced look at the promise and pitfalls of AI. But before we get started, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and click that notification bell for upcoming notifications. Let's get started.
Okay.
So, hi,
So,
Embracers.
welcome back.
I promise this is us and not AI robots of us.
I don't
Can't
think
promise it will always be that way.
I was gonna say I don't think AI can be like this, like goofy and like totally like random.
Watch. It will.
I mean, it
Because all it
will,
has
but
to do is watch us. It has to
right.
observe the data from our previous episodes and then mimic it.
Yeah, I guess it's possible. Yeah, okay, true. But I'm just thinking like normally like AI, it's like very like sophisticated as far as like its responses, not this like, oh, I'm gonna start a sentence and then shift to another sentence midway through and then cycle back. So
Yeah.
hopefully we don't encounter ADHD AI in the near future.
I think it might already be there. We at least have autistic AI, but that's for another discussion. But we wanted to make sure that we touched on AI because we are definitely noticing that AI is advancing rapidly. And so this is an important topic for us to touch on because it's already integrating into autism community. So for example, we talked a couple episodes ago about the Koji app, and that was an app that was using AI in order to help autistic individuals communicate. So like an AAC, but using AI. So we already see that it's being incorporated into even medical applications and social situations. We also just recently did our episode with the virtual reality. So we're starting to see virtual reality being used for like social skills therapy for autistic people as well. And AI is going to kind of basically find its way into everything at this point. It's really escalating rapidly. So I think it's important for us to talk about, what are the potential benefits and gains that we can get from this technology, not just for like our autistic kiddos, but even us as like parents of autistic kids. And also what are some of the potential dangers or some potential pitfalls to the technology as well.
And I think you raise a good point because like there's it's painful when you think about AI because there's like two totally opposing like thoughts. Because I think of it kind of similar to like the introduction to the internet. So the internet can be like a fantastic place. I mean, you can, connect with people. You can obtain resources and information, scientific studies easily, and like as far as like advanced technology, like further through like the sharing of information and collaboration. But then obviously there's like the like pitfalls of the internet as well. So it's kind of like saying like, is AI good or bad? It's like, yes. It's like the
Yes,
best.
I know,
Like
right?
it's like the
Both.
best answer. It's both. Like you it can go either way, and we're kind of on like the tipping point, and it's kind of like where will we see it kind of shift in the future? And that's kind of where I'm at, not really sure
Yeah.
what to think of the future.
Yeah. So I think like the first obvious benefit to AI is that communication piece. We already touched on this in that other episode, so I don't want to go too deep into that because AI powered communication is basically starting right now. And so that means that there's going to be apps like the Koji app that will be able to help nonverbal individuals express themselves more easily. If you go back to that interview, we talk about exactly how Koji works. But for example, it's now giving people the freedom to have more expansive vocabulary and communication that sounds more natural than what you were previously limited to in like standard AAC devices. So it doesn't sound so robotic anymore. It's not like short little copy pasted words and sentences. You can have more fluent language and more fluent expression with words and phrases that allow nonverbal people to express themselves more fluently, like more authentic to what they're feeling. They're not as caged into specific words and phrases anymore. So who knows what that'll unlock?
Yeah, I think that's in that context, I think that's fantastic. It kind of like opens a gateway to kind of allow this community that was much more limited as far as what they were able to say and be connected to the community. Now it kind of opens them up. So now they have the opportunity to kind of fully be accepted into the community, where it's not like, okay, there's like a delay or there's you're sounding like a robot kind of thing that might turn some people off in a conversation. But now it seems like it's kind of more encompassing into creating a group around that. So, I mean, in
Yeah.
that context, I think that that is a good thing to strive for.
Yeah. And even for verbal autistics and people who are like level one high functioning like myself, AI is working a lot to help me with my communication because I have relied a lot on AI to be able to respond to emails and everything in a more like professional or empathetic way. For example, like if I start emails, it used to be I'd have to write emails and then I just go, my first pass that is always very blunt, straight, directed to the point. And I would always have to manually go back, reread it, and try to manually put in fluff and pleasantries because I know that people need that or they get like offended. So it used to be that I had to do all that like manually. And now, like with AI apps within your email, you could basically be like, enter a prompt that says, rewrite this more politely or sound less like a jerk. And I use
Make
that a
me
lot.
make me be nice.
Yeah, make
I
this
mean,
sound like I'm trying to be nice
happily.
and helpful and not offensive. Yeah, and that has been super duper helpful. Like I have been using that a lot. So whenever you guys out there get emails from me, AI is evolved. It is assisting me in those emails. So it's something that like helps across the entire autism spectrum, whether you're nonverbal or verbal and high functioning.
That's true. I was going to say, unless the email is very blunt and direct, then that's probably
Then I
all
didn't have
Leah.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that
didn't
was
have
all
time.
Leah. There's no AI in the mix there. But no, I mean,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right because, like, some things, I mean, if you needed to respond to things quickly and you don't have the time or like the energy to kind of go through and put kind of, I mean, the whole process to put the email together, I mean, it kind of streamlines it more. So you're like your thoughts are there with the assistance of AI. But I know a lot of time as far as like sometimes like you'll have to kind of like sit down and like kind of recover after like a long day of like I don't know editing podcasting, responding to emails, like all the on top of having a full-time job. Like sometimes you just have to kind of like sit down and like just kind of like
The social
decompress, like
burnout. Yeah.
right, like reboot your system. I don't know what you want to how you want to phrase it. But like sometimes if you're able to put in AI, it kind of helps in kind of working through these together. So it's kind of like a partner assisting you along the way when it's kind of like a
Yeah.
like one man show in some of these cases.
Yeah. The other positive that I see potential with in AI is there are these awesome like AI kind of like scribe apps and they have these already implemented in like Zoom calls and Google Meets and things like that where you basically have like an AI note taker and summarizer for you. And that has been super helpful for somebody like me who has like delayed processing, executive dysfunction, ADHD, that sort of thing, because you basically don't have to choose between, okay, I'm trying to listen and comprehend what you're saying at the same time that I'm trying to take notes for reference, which for me, I can't really do both. I can either hear what you're saying, process it, and answer your questions, or I can take notes to save for later reference. I can't do both at the same time. So having AI be able to basically just take care of all the notes for me, give me a summary of what the highlights are, and then tell me what my next tasks or to-do items are based off of the outcome of the meeting or discussion. Super helpful because I had to basically piece all of that together before AI. So now it's made it so that people who are neurodivergent have an opportunity to really compete in the workplace and in college and stuff like that with their neurotypical peers. Like we don't have to struggle and lag behind all the time because AI is now allowing us to kind of like catch up to our peers.
So basically like the what is it, work smarter, not harder mentality. Like if you're able
Yes.
to deploy AI to like fill in the gaps, to kind of like
Delegate. Yeah.
yeah,
Delegate the
like I
busy
mean,
work.
right. So you'd be kind of like crazy to like basically like work yourself to death without using that. Now that we know that that is a capability to implement into like daily life, essentially.
Yep.
Plus, obviously, if you're delegating some of that to the AI, that allows you to do more with what you're working on so you can get further into the work that you're doing. Or, I mean, in any situation, you can probably push further because you're not tied up with, oh, no, I have to tediously make bullet points, take notes, do all this. You're already one step ahead. So,
Yeah,
like I
and
say,
that's
added
super
benefit.
helpful. that's super helpful for neurodivergent people who have like limited like mental resources, where like your cup gets full a lot faster than everyone else's bucket. So when it comes to like having to retain all this information and all that stuff, you have more room to do that when you're able to delegate or offload some of those tasks to AI. So then you can basically just prioritize what's the most important to have that human aspect of whatever it is that you're doing. And then the stuff that's not so important, like the rote memorization stuff and things like that, you can just delegate that out. So that has been something that I have found personally really useful. And it really kind of overlaps too with like the educational side of things. I think one of the ways that we will see this really be implemented, it hasn't quite yet, but like in schools, I can see this also helping with like adaptive education. So, like, you see a little bit with like SATs and stuff where they incorporated like those adaptive testing, but it would be cool if you could start incorporating more of like AI adapted educational content that's unique to each individual learning style, which is possible with AI. So, like, we have kids who are gifted, but they are also socially delayed in certain areas. We have the struggle of like, okay, well, if we're putting them in school, they're not really learning because academically they're ahead of everyone else. However, they're delayed in other social skills. So, if we incorporated AI into like educational systems, you could theoretically make it so that the educational content uniquely adapts to each kid, which I think would be really, really cool.
Well, it'd be super beneficial. I mean, not just for like kids with autism or other special needs or anything like that, because if you're able to basically have a tailored learning environment for each individual student, where it recognizes, okay, what are your strengths? What should we spend more time focusing on? I mean, you would be able to like greatly increase just the output of like the students compared to like everyone sitting in the same class. There are some that are very advanced in reading, some that are just learning the basics, and you're somehow trying to bridge the gap so everyone is increasing at a steady rate of progress, because you don't want the kid at the very top of the class to be held back, but then at the same time you don't want the kid who's struggling to be left behind. So like if teachers, I mean, or if anyone's able to implement a process, then they can focus on the individual students, and then it's a like very tailored custom learning process for
Yeah.
each student, which would be amazing.
And it reduces the workload to get that done. So it's like you don't have to worry about like, oh, we don't have enough hours in our day to be able to do this. If AI is taking away a lot of that stuff, then it frees up time. And that's another thing. If teachers are allowed to start having AI grade their papers and like do all this other stuff, that's going to free up the burden that they have to get things done. Like, I know like teachers that are staying after hours grading papers at like 8 p.m. at night, and they just have to get it done, and there aren't enough hours in the day, so you can't even focus on the teaching aspect of special education. And I feel like if AI is used correctly, we can alleviate some of that so that then our education system can focus on what it's intended to be, which is education, which right now is not what's happening. So I feel like that is something that could potentially help a lot on that sense. On the flip side of things, if you look at the parent perspective of the education system, AI can also help there. And I think one of the places that this is already really helpful is helping parents prepare for like IEP meetings and navigating IEP meetings. Right now, if you don't know anything about IEPs and you're struggling to navigate these meetings, it used to be that you have no choice but to hire an advocate. And now you don't need to do that. Like, you don't have to spend hundreds of dollars on an advocate. You can literally just go on ChatGPT and ask it, like, hey, what are my rights in the IEP meeting? What are my child's rights? How should I navigate this problem? How can I create a SMART goal around this target? And by using AI to help you pre-plan, then when you go into the meeting, you're already prepared. You already know what you need. You know what those buzzwords are. You know how to navigate the conversation. You can even ask AI assistants with like, hey, I really want to talk about this, but I'm worried it's going to come off this way. How can I phrase it in such a way so that it doesn't like sound offensive, or make the school go on the defensive, or whatever it may be. And AI will help tailor that so that it's the most diplomatic way possible. So I think that that's something that if you haven't already started using as a parent navigating IEPs in the school system, go ahead and take a look. Like, go get a ChatGPT account or whatever AI you want to use and play around with it and ask it how it can help you with an IEP. It's really useful in my case.
Well, and I was going to say, I mean, the other nice thing is as long as you know like how to ask basic questions and keep following up with it, I mean, it can kind of direct you, and you can say, oh, can you give me an example of this? And it'll say, sure. And it'll give you a list of all different examples. Or if, I mean, if you need to dive deeper into a particular area, oh, what is a specific law that is connected to this? It'll pull the different laws and everything like that. So, I mean, as long as you know what questions to ask and what you're looking for, it can definitely direct you into a way that helps you during these meetings. So it is less stressful because it's doing essentially all the digging. Or, I mean, granted, most of the responses, I mean, they're kind of limited with like how much output they do. But if you keep asking the questions and diving deeper into certain areas, like you can easily take notes and put together like a great like packet of resources to help you for the next meeting.
Yeah, and that is one of the downsides is that AI is still limited. That's changing rapidly. I mean, I think by the next year we're going to have like really fluent AI. But as of right now, the recording of this episode, AI is still pretty limited. So you still need to really prompt it very specifically for what you want. So that is one downside. You have to be very specific. Um, but it's also important to mention there are some negatives to AI, and there's some concerns and red flags that you need to think about and consider before using it. And one of those is data privacy concerns. So if you have not used AI before, if you use AI, you have to use the social media rule, which is like anything that you post on social media or the internet, just keep in mind it lives there forever. And you have to post it with the anticipation that eventually somebody that you don't want to see it is going to see it. So when you put stuff in there, avoid putting any sort of private and identifying information. So you don't want to necessarily put your kid's name in there, dates of birth, social security numbers, nothing that you wouldn't want a complete stranger to have. So that's definitely a pitfall. So when you're using it, just make sure to avoid that type of information. And there's also issues when it comes to how AI understands autism right now. So if you're not familiar with how AI works, at least my understanding of how it originally works, it kind of basically scrapes data from the universe of the internet and it compiles answers and responses based off of that information. So it's heavily influenced by whoever is creating the data archive and what data exists on the internet. That basically means that there's a social bias to it. So if you live in a time where, let's say for some reason, everybody in your culture is super pro neurodiversity, then the AI will probably default to being pro neurodiversity. But if you live in an era where everybody is like super anti neurodiversity, then AI will also pick up on that and likely give you responses that are also anti neurodiversity. So because of that, you have to kind of be careful how you use AI because it can prompt things that have bias in it. So when you're looking at it, you have to really be careful of that bias. And one of the bias that I haven't personally noticed is that there's certain AI that are unintentionally kind of offensive when it comes to autism. I've seen it less so with like the verbal prompting. Those tend to be pretty neuroaffirming. But if you use an AI to prompt an image and you say like, give me a picture of somebody who's autistic, it is highly offensive right now. Like it is basically trying to portray somebody that clearly physically looks like an anomaly essentially, and then they put all these stereotypes like that person is riding a train and like that person has like all sorts of like autism stereotypes. So there is a problem with AI being really like negatively stereotypical of autistic people right now. So that is kind of like a red flag that I've noticed and a concern that I have because people who aren't familiar with autism, who might be looking up information about autism, they just assume AI is like the god of knowledge. So whatever AI says, they're going to believe without questioning it. So it's a little bit concerning that AI can essentially nudge people in a direction or another in terms of like their belief systems, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's only because, yeah, you can't think of AI as like the know-all because it's just taking information that's already been input by humans. So, like, obviously, if there was information that is not necessarily accurate or it's perceived in a different way, I mean, it's only as good as the person or program or algorithm that is putting it in. I think over time, it might kind of work its way out, hopefully a little bit better. But yeah, I would say that it would be wise to not just go off of the first question you ask and basically just take that as like know all. Like I would definitely follow up and see if you're able to gain more information outside of just the one question. That's what I'm going to run with. Otherwise, you might fall into some of these pitfalls where all you think autism is someone sitting on a train or something like that.
Yeah, and honestly, I've played around with AI a lot, and AI, though at least like ChatGPT, for example, seems to have been programmed in a way where it wants to make you happy, whoever's prompting. And so the other thing that I've learned is if you prompt it aggressively enough, you can get it to admit things that are not true. So like I was able to prompt it aggressively enough to get it to admit that there are like 30 letters of the alphabet, and it basically profusely apologized to me for telling me that it never was that before. And so that's one of the things that you also have to be cautious of is that the information you're getting from AI is not always going to be accurate. It could have been basically bullied into saying something that's inaccurate. And I know that for a fact because I've been able to successfully do it myself. So that's something that you also want to consider is make sure you're validating whatever AI is telling you with outside and additional sources, just in case, because you want to make sure that you're getting accurate information. But the other thing, and this is a social impact that some people aren't really taking into consideration either, is that people already are starting to become over reliant on AI tools. And we've barely even started these. I'm a little guilty of this when it comes to like my email tone. So I'm pretty much defaulting to using AI to help me with that. But I see that as more of like a disability accommodation. But I feel like because AI makes it so easy to do things, I think it's going to end up hindering development of real world social skills. And potentially, AI could get to the point where it's substituting human interaction. Like at the rate we're going, humans aren't going to be socializing with each other directly. It's going to be like me and my AI is going to talk to your AI. They're going to have a conversation, and we're kind of like behind the scenes, which would be potentially devastating to the autistic community because like you're not going to learn any social skills whatsoever.
Right. I mean, we've even seen that. I mean, there's TikTok videos where it's like a person in a class and they're taking an online test and they're just copying and pasting the questions that are being asked on the test into the AI. And the AI is telling them what answer to select and they're just going down selecting. Like they don't even have to read the question because AI will read it, search the internet, pull up what the answer is, and then just move on. So, I mean, kind of similar, I would argue, to that of the internet, but more severe because like when we had to write a paper through school, we're going online, we're Googling, we're pulling articles and different things like that. Previous generations who didn't have the internet actually had to dive into books, they had to read, and they actually had to learn the material. I mean, yes, I feel like they were much more limited because you can't get your hands on every article under the sun that has whatever you're looking for, but you actually had to learn the material like kind of like a hard copy version versus our generation where we had the internet, so we were able to use more resources. But in doing so, I mean, how many people have taken things off of like Wiki and just kind of kept going on with life? So you're not really learning the material, you're just kind of pulling and rephrasing and moving on. But with AI, I definitely feel like it's a step further removed where if you do keep going down the same pathway, you're basically just using AI to basically answer everything and you're basically learning nothing except how to copy and paste things over.
Yeah. I think the issue that we're running into here is like people get really excited about AI and all the possibilities. And it's true, like AI can make all sorts of medical advancements. Like, for example, AI could go ahead and be used at some point to develop a program that can scan every single person who's been diagnosed with autism, like scan their genetic code through like a saliva sample, and then pick out, oh, we found a common genome. We know now that this is the gene that's linked to autism. And they can basically figure that out in a heartbeat compared to the data and time and effort that would have taken for humans to do that. So it's going to be helpful in situations like that. But at the same time, it's also going to potentially lead to an over reliance. And what I've noticed is like with the advent of the internet, for example, because that was our generation, we're the ones that went from encyclopedia to www dot. And what we learned from that experience is that people thought that the internet was going to create like mega geniuses. Like the concept is right. It's good on paper, right? So it's like, well, now you have the world at your fingertips. So anybody without like limitation can learn everything about everything. And so we think like fantastically, like, wow, people are going to evolve and be really smart. But like, what happened? What happened when the internet came?
Well, I mean, then you had the social media that came also, but I think it kind of creates the two camps essentially, like those that are focused in trying to advance or be very focused on knowledge, academics, and all that. They can try and shift into it, like what I think it was intended for, trying to focus more on academics versus like people who are just kind of trying to get by and just, I don't know, live on social
Yeah.
media and all that.
Because, like, what happened was instead of people using it to build on their intelligence and continue to develop their skills, they actually ended up using it as a place to, like, dump insults on people and start online social media wars and share, like, hilarious, admittedly hilarious memes. But, like, this isn't really like the evolution of human intelligence that we thought the internet was going to be. We're like, of course, if people have access to everything in their pocket, of course it's going to make a bunch of super geniuses because it's so much easier to access the information now. But human nature, like, is not as easy to predict as people think. And so people didn't use it that way. And they actually used it as a way to kind of, in a way, degrade our intelligence because people on the internet, they treat each other in such a horrible way that you would
Oh,
never
it's
see people do in real life. And
oh
that's
yeah,
all because of the internet.
oh yeah, it's very barbaric. I mean, and then I mean, yes, that is one component, but then also there's even the term doom scrolling, like basically like you're so fixated on social media, you're just kind of scrolling through, your day is passing, you're wasting so much time. Like, yes, you could have done all sorts of other things with your day, but you've spent it just kind of on social media or wherever you do it. And I mean, sometimes, yes, I am definitely guilty of doing that. Like, if it's a slow day and there's not much going on, sure, I'm going to be on social media, just kind of checking out what's going on around the world. But it creates just like a fake reality because
Yeah.
you're only seeing what people are posting in the most positive light, and then
Or
on
the
the flip,
opposite, in
or
the
the
most
right,
negative side. Yeah.
right. So it's kind of like a false reality because none of this is actually real. It's all just
Yeah.
the either the happiness or like the total doom and gloom kind of thing. So it's not really reality. It's
A
just like what,
realistic portrayal. Yeah.
right, the
Yeah.
Matrix, if you will.
And that's the concern for me with AI is we've seen what happens when we give people technology that's supposed to advance their intelligence and like instead people use it to just fight with each other and dox each other and like do all these like negative things. So my concern is like, AI is that on steroids. So I feel like that's just gonna potentially make that worse. So there is like positives and negatives. And really what we have to look at is like, what decision is humanity going to make? Because that part is like, that's our choice. We can choose to make the right decision or not. So that's kind of like where we're at right now. But, in general, that's why it's important to make sure that AI is balanced and like that the use of AI in our lives is balanced. So one of the things that we want to make sure that we are doing with our kids because this is going to be their generation, like internet was our generation, AI is going to be their generation. So we're already thinking about like, okay, this is going to be necessary in certain areas. It can be helpful. Like, again, I use it to assist me with email writing and I find it super helpful for note taking and things like that. So we can balance the benefits and use those as like helpful accommodations or ways to help them live life more efficiently with, autism. But at the same time, we want to be mindful of our usage and we don't want them to become dependent on it. It's kind of like when we talked about how we had the wagon for our kids because of elopement, that yes, it's really helpful, but we also want to take them out of the wagon every so often to practice those skills so that eventually they're still growing and developing. So it's the same thing with AI and your brain and your social skills. Like you want to continue to develop those skills and not fully rely on AI, or you might ultimately lose those skills.
And that's why I think it's important to be like mindful of it. So I mean, like I think of kind of similar to like I don't know, losing weight essentially. Like no one, well, no one like basically loses weight basically by just like eating what they normally want to, but you gain weight by just not paying attention, kind of eating or eating whatever you want. Same thing with like getting into debt. You don't like basically you have to change your behavior.
Intentionally get into
Right.
debt.
You have to like change your
Yeah.
behavior essentially. Like you don't just like keep spending how you normally do if you're in debt and that doesn't pull you out of debt. You have to actually like make a change. So I think by being more mindful about like AI and being aware of like all the potentially negative components it can pose, I think then you can kind of walk the line of like, okay, yeah, I can do it for like dumb memes and getting like funny jokes or whatever. But also in a positive, like, oh, I'm going to learn something new today, and I'm going to ask AI a bunch of questions and try and learn and make a better program that way. So I definitely think being aware of each component and kind of walking that path.
Yeah. And so my biggest tip for parents out there navigating AI is evaluate and choose your AI tools wisely. And also what we do is we perceive AI as an assistant. So it's somebody that we essentially are delegating tasks to, that we have, other more bigger fish to fry essentially. So we delegate tasks to them as needed and we maintain oversight. So look at it as kind of like a supervisor employee relationship. You don't want it to be like supervisor to supervisor, or you sure as don't want to be the employee and have AI be your supervisor. You want to maintain control of what you're saying and awareness. So if you're going to use AI to navigate an IEP meeting, for example, make sure you're not just blindly relying on it. Like you are reading through what it's telling you. You're following up by making sure that you understand those rights. So if it mentions FAPE, look it up and make sure you know what FAPE is. Like validate these things. Don't just blindly go with what it says, because what happens is you'll be in that IEP meeting. They'll poke a hole in something that you said and you'll have no way to combat it because you didn't actually look into that information. So use it as more of like a personal assistant who kind of does things for you as you need, but you have to remain the person in charge. You still have to be the head on that shoulder.
Yeah, I think that, that's great, great reminder because obviously you don't want to be in a meeting and they say one thing that you didn't ask that specific question to AI and you're kind of just stuck there being like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. I say be nice to AI. I tend to thank
Yeah, because it's going to take over soon.
I tend to thank my AI and encourage it, being like, you did so great, thank you. Because sooner or later, Skynet is going to be activated, and then the robots are going to come. So I always want to be.
How do we know
nice.
it already happened? How do we know we're not in a simulation?
Exactly. That's why I say be nice to your AI, because if it gets angry, at least it'll go to you and be like, you were always nice. I'll be okay with you. So nice tip there.
So before we wrap up here, I just want to ask you guys, how has AI impacted your or your child's life, either positively or negatively? Or have you not interacted with AI yet? And if you haven't, what's stopping you? Do you have concerns, or do you just not know how to use it? That's one of the things that I've learned too, is because it's so new, a lot of parents don't even know what AI is or how to use it or access it. And also, what concerns do you have about the use of AI in supporting autistic individuals? There's obviously a lot of positives that can come out of it, but do you have any concerns, like the ones we mentioned of stereotyping autism? Is there something else that concerns you about AI? Make sure that you share your thoughts on our YouTube and Facebook at Autism Wish. We will read all of those comments. And also, you can join in on our members-only chat on Patreon. You can join by visiting our website, autismwish.org, and clicking on Become a Member. Again, just as a reminder, AI's potential is really great to empower our communication, independence, and a lot of life skills that autistic individuals need, but it can introduce some problems with privacy, bias, and a lot of other concerns. So really, we still just need to keep our finger on that pulse, and we'll see where it goes, hoping for the best.
And watch your back out there.
If you found today's episode helpful, consider becoming a member today. And also, just to let you know, members unlock exclusive perks like bonus entries in our monthly Embracing Autism grant. And also, your help is going to help us to continue to provide valuable resources to the autism community. With that said, we want to thank you for listening. Remember, you're not alone on this journey, and we will keep on keeping on. We'll see y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye.